Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another series review. Today, we're going to be talking about Creature Commandos. This is the first really project in the DCU, kind of the soft launch before the big launch with Superman, if you will. But as you guys know, I am not alone. I am with the wonderful and amazing Nicholas Iricchio. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Good, how are you, buddy?
Good as always, and I'm glad that both of us are here to talk about Creature Commandos because
Yeah.
it kind of came out in a time where I couldn't catch it as it aired because I think it did midnight releases, if I'm remembering correctly. And
Midnight, West Coast, so
yeah,
3
so
a.m. for
yeah,
us.
yeah, even worse for us. And I got the funniest and most polite denial email of all time when I asked for early screenings of them. It was wonderful, and but I was able to watch them, week to week, and I thoroughly enjoyed the series. And I think its weakest episode is the first episode, which a lot of shows we've seen recently, especially in the nerd geek space, the first episode is a banger and then it slowly falls off. I think this was a show that started off okay and then it slowly got better into where I think it really nailed the last really half of the show, and I didn't dislike the first half of the show at all. I thought it was all good. By the way, we're going to be diving into full spoilers on this, full spoiler review for Creature Commandos. But I'll kind of go first here. I thought that, the dynamic of having each episode kind of dive into a new commando and their backstory, at first I was like, oh, I don't know how well this is going to work just because I didn't know how it was going to properly format with like the main story. But I thought it worked really well. There are a couple standouts. The Weasel episode is completely fucking heartbreaking and just beautiful. The Dr. Frostus episode was one of the darkest things I've ever watched ever. They
Until the finale.
right, yeah. Like when they make him put his hands into his dead family's blood to like get the fingerprint, I was like, Jesus Christ. And then in the same show, you have some incredible jokes that also happen, and I think tonally, it balanced the tone really well, and I honestly think the animation medium is what really helped that. Like, I think this was a great choice to have this show be animated. I don't think they could have gotten away with a lot of those tonal shifts had it not been in this medium, so I think that was a perfect choice. I thought David Harbour's Frankenstein was fucking hilarious. I loved his performance, and he has one of my favorite jokes in the show, and it's when him and Rick Flag Sr. are hiding from Clayface, and he just kind of barely hides behind something, and Rick Flag says, do you think you're hiding? And Frankenstein just goes, oh, I don't give a shit. Like, that made me laugh so hard when I
think
watched
with
it.
Frankenstein, that was a tough character because I feel like David Harbour just does a knockout performance, but given the character's storyline, I feel like that could have been off the rails really fast, performance-wise, or just from a viewer perspective. Like, this is a little too much, and it does go to those places with him and the bride and everything. But I think that David Harbour really anchors it tonally and is able to sort of thread that line.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And, the way that you kind of fall in love with each character as it goes, because, like, I like Dr. Frostfist in the beginning, but it wasn't until his episode where I kind of retroactively was like, wow, I like this character a lot more now than I did previously, just when you learn more information about them. And how have we gone this far without talking about G.I. Robot? G.I. Robot was outstanding.
He was great.
And I'm so happy that they brought him back. I was hoping they would the whole show. Now, I don't love his final new design, but that's a small issue. I'll get over that.
He did a Groot.
Did a Groot, exactly.
He did a Groot. Yeah.
There are a few things that are. I don't have many negatives on the show, but we can dive into them a little bit. I thought that obviously the purpose of the show was to learn more about these characters and dive into their backstories, and on that level, I think it worked tremendously. I didn't dislike the main story in like the modern time, like just how the real time, I should say, of like the story. I thought it was fine, but it wasn't anything to like sneeze at. Like, it didn't really get interesting until the very, very last episode with the bride. By the way, the bride, fucking awesome character. And the final confrontation between the bride and the princess, I thought was awesome. And like that build up to that moment was great. But, the rest of the story, I was just kind of like, all right, this is just kind of playing out a little bit, but that's fine. And something that I personally find annoying, and I know not everyone's going to find it annoying. I find it annoying that clearly this show was written in a time where it was supposed to just be part of the DCEU. And so they make references to a lot of James Gunn's DCEU projects, and now those references are canon without the actual projects technically being canon, just meaning they come from a similar backstory in this new universe. I find it a little bit annoying. I just do. I just, now look, I love the show. I'm glad we got the show. But it's just like, I just wish it could have been a bit reworked. If anyone who's watched this channel for any period of time knows, I was for a full reboot, not kind of this like 80% reboot that they're doing. But I found that a little bit annoying. I thought the main story, not the main story, but like the real-time story was the weakest part. But other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed the show. What other thoughts you got for us?
I mean, I think that the half reboot thing, it's annoying because you're just sort of asking the audience to do their own editing. Like he said, he's like, yeah, Peacemaker season 1 happened, except the Justice League at the end.
Yeah.
Which I get. It's sort of like the tail end, and really, like, Peacemaker's the only one that sees them, so you could really make a preference like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Like, no, they
Yeah.
weren't there.
Yeah.
I think in terms of this show, they did a good job of sort of pulling those references. Like in the beginning, you have her saying to Rick Flag Sr., like, I'm sorry about what happened to your son. And like you don't really, as an audience member, have to have watched the Suicide Squad. You're like, oh, he's Rick Flag Sr. There must be a Rick Flag Jr. Something happened to him. And that's just more character development for him in this specific project. But then there's bigger leaps that's like, oh, they shut down your task force and now you have to do this and that. And you're like, this seems like big leaps that I have to take as a viewer.
Yeah, and they mentioned Project Starfish by name, which if you've never seen Suicide Squad, it means nothing. But when you have, you're like, oh, this was clearly a spinoff of that movie, which isn't technically no longer canon, and it just becomes a whole thing.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, it would bother me more if the project was bad. And since the project is good, it does not bother me that much. Like, it's something I can accept and move forward with. I thought everything...
Like, if Peacemaker sucked, it's like, why are we doing this? Just because you have your name on it? Like,
yeah.
But I personally enjoyed Peacemaker. I'm excited for the second season. So I'm like, all right, I guess as a viewer and someone who's like up to date on the pop culture things in that realm, I can do that sort of mental editing and just be like, this is what it is. And as a viewer, get over that. But if they're going to keep sort of pulling these deep cut references from it, that's going to get annoying to someone like who hasn't watched those projects.
Yeah, no, 100%, I agree. And, before we kind of wrap up with everything, I just kind of wanted to go through and kind of do, like, our favorite moments from the show.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the finale a little bit. Nina didn't deserve any of that shit. Not at all. And it's so sad to see. I loved...
It works so well for the sort of bride's story arc,
100%.
Unfortunately, right? Because you have Nina, who really is not a monster, as we saw from her back. I mean, she is a monster, but she literally did nothing wrong or evil, unlike every other backstory that we've seen, maybe except for like weasels, right? And she wasn't supposed to, I mean, she's not supposed to be on the mission because she really didn't do anything wrong. She's not a murderer. She's not this anything. So it makes sense for her to, unfortunately, right, be caught in the crossfire of this whole thing. And that really works for the bride's story arc because they're very clearly setting her up to be the leader on it and realizing, oh, she can't really be this sort of passive bystander. This was my friend and I couldn't protect her. How can I protect everyone else?
Yeah. And it was really haunting. And, my favorite moment with Nina, they all kind of involve the bride. Like the scene where they're at the brothel, I really, really liked that sequence and how they kind of built their character there. And going back to Nina's backstory, God, when her father died, I was like, oh my gosh, no. I also, Frankenstein's backstory was interesting, and I like that we kind of got both Bride's and his version of the backstory a little bit. Frankenstein's just such an awful guy, and I can't stop loving when he's on screen. Like, I'm just like, give me more of this awful, hunky beast.
Well, again,
like,
that goes back to, like, David Harbour just nails what they
Yes.
needed tonally in that moment. Otherwise, that would have
100%.
been like, no, why are we doing this storyline? This is too much compared to, like, everything else. You know? And I, a personal, my favorite, I loved the Weasel episode. I mean, I loved that character in the Suicide Squad. And I just love this recurring bit that, like, Weasel can't die.
Yes.
And in this one, he's actually sort of hailed as the hero. And
Hmm.
they're like, "We're gonna build a statue for you," and I'm like, "Yeah, give him a statue. That's
Yeah,
my guy."
yeah, and I also really enjoyed uh the Cheers to the Tin Man, the GI Robot episode. When he has to kill all of his
Mhm.
friends who turned out to be Nazis. It
Oh,
was
his sequence was great too. The
yeah.
like musical sequence that they got.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was great. And
I liked all of Doctor Phosphorus's sort of like powers. Like I like when he is with the tank and he flips it off and just goes through
yeah,
the
just
guy's
walks through it.
skulls
Yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I thought that was all really fun.
Yeah. That was great. And I really liked. Honestly, I think like if you had to pick like your top two favorite characters in the show, like who would they be?
Oh man.
You know what? We'll go three. Two is hard. Three,
I mean, I'm gonna say Weasel just because that's
naturally.
just a character that I love. Honestly, anything Sean Gunn does, I'm gonna say Weasel and GI. I thought that they were great.
Uh-huh.
And I really liked. I really did like the bride. I thought that she, to me, was sort of the lead character of the show personally.
Yeah, and she kind of
Just
becomes the lead character like throughout the episodes.
exactly, and I liked watching that progression week by week, especially when her whole story is sort of she's the bride and this tied to Frankenstein, and just sort of that whole build up of her own agency that she literally wants nothing to do with the guy just because she was made for him, like
Hmm.
all that stuff. I think just really worked for her becoming that sort of lead character.
I agree. And if I had to kind of give, and I didn't dislike any character, but if I had to give
Yeah.
like my top three in no particular order, I would go the bride. I would go probably Frankenstein, and
Hmm.
he's an awful guy, but the character's so well done.
Yeah.
And my heart when it says GI Robot, but we also didn't get a whole lot of GI Robot.
Mm-mm.
But I have to be
That's
honest
how
with my
impactful he is.
yeah, and I was just about to say like that. I
Yeah.
have to be honest with myself and say it's still GI Robot. Like, and
Hmm.
that's not a knock on any of the other characters. I really enjoyed them, but just like the impact that he had, like you said, on the few episodes he was in, it was just so amazing. And I also love how Rick Flag kind of served as the audience surrogate character of like when the show starts you kind of think the show's about him, and then as it goes on it
Yeah.
slowly becomes about everybody else, and it was a good path to kind of keep you in. And again, another just downfall of like knowing the project's coming out and knowing the part of the plan that they've announced. When Clayface kicks Rick Flag's ass, you're like, well, he's alive because he's in Superman and Peacemaker. So,
Yeah.
but like that's that. I don't fault it on this series for that. It's just kind of just that knowing some of the outside. What
Mhm.
I'm curious about, because they don't really say if Clayface is dead, but they highly imply that he's dead. And now we're getting a Clayface movie that's allegedly set in this universe. So I wonder if it's leading up to this moment or if he's alive and it's after. I don't know. That's just my brain. I'm getting off topic, but I
I mean,
am.
he's just made of clay. I'm sure he can sort of reassemble if needed.
True, true.
Mhm.
But with all that down, overall, my final thoughts. I thought it was a really well done animated series that served as a nice soft launch into the DCU. I think that it does struggle a little bit from its real time story just being a little bit bland, but it's more than made up for by the incredible depth of the characters. The humor, the gore, the darkness all blends together really well. And it became something that every week I really looked forward to watching. And it got renewed for season two, and I, for one, will be watching 100%. Final thoughts
Yeah,
from
no,
you?
absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, the team they set up going into the next season looks really good because you have the bride back, Weasel lives, the new and improved GI robot, Doctor Phosphorus, and then there was that sort of bat lady and a
Mm,
mummy and King Shark. Like, yeah, give me more of that.
100%.
And
100%.
I'm excited for it too because obviously Weasel and oh no, Weasel and Shark never met.
Yeah, they didn't because he died. He quote unquote drowned in the beginning of the movie, right?
Yeah. And they were part of the different I mean, maybe they
Mhm.
were on the helicopter ride. I don't
But
know.
look, but here we go. We're referencing it as if it's canon, Nicholas.
You know what?
There we
That's fair.
go.
That's fair, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. But
You know what bothered me
guys,
though? Can I just go off one brief little tangent? I don't know if
please
this bothered you as much as me.
go on.
James Gunn having a cartoon of himself in the beginning.
So here's the thing. When I first saw it, I was
Yeah.
bothered by it.
Yeah.
I later learned in interviews, just because I dive into like cast and crew interviews all the time,
Uh-huh.
I later learned that like the animators did that without telling James Gunn, and then when he watched it, he was just like, all right, like he didn't get rid of it. But,
Yeah.
whether or not he should have gotten rid of it is a debate for another time. But when I first saw it, I was kind of like, really?
Gotcha. That
But
wasn't
then,
a directive, but it wasn't
yeah,
a
yeah,
like, all right, it could stay.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of how it goes, which made me feel a little bit
Yeah.
better. But I still, I kind of understand what you're saying. Yeah, 100%.
Well, because then it's like because I feel like if they do other animated shows, I feel like the created by or the writers should get that same level of
Oh yeah, yeah. Did it start a precedent that they have to
credit.
uphold?
Yeah, and now listen, like to people in the fandom, right? James Gunn's recognizable. I can look at that graph and be like, oh yeah, that's James Gunn. Maybe these other writers, depending on who it is, maybe not so. But I feel like that's a great way to give sort of more representation in that field. So that's something that I would like to see, I guess, if we're setting that precedent. Because I feel like if they don't, then it does feel kind of egotistical in a way.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
completely fair. But guys, what did you think of Creature Commandos? Did you like it as much as us? Did you not like it very much? We'd love to see your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.